Hi everybody, welcome back to my house. I'm Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts. Channel name change coming soon. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to be walking through my latest pattern, Home Table Runner. It is so much fun. And if you have the bug of paper piecing, which many of you do who are following along in the Sunday Stars mystery quilt, and you get done with your pieces faster than the videos come out, this might be right up your alley. Now, one thing is for sure, when I'm writing patterns, I have a hard time explaining all the different little steps when it comes to paper piecing. And if I wrote them out, I would confuse you more than I confused myself. And that is confusing. So this video is primarily focused on the paper piecing portion of the table runner, but I am going to bring you through and finish this project too. But if you're on the fence about paper piecing, I'm hoping that you find this video so helpful. Guess what? This table runner is only 4 blocks of paper piecing. Now I am going to speed up the process of this video. I've sped up the video quite a bit, but did you know that you can slow down the video right in the YouTube settings, right here on YouTube? And I'm going to go through and walk you through the steps right now, show you and point you right to where you need to go if you want to see this video much slower. My goal is to speed it up for those of you who have an idea of what to do and just need to see the steps, right? I'll walk you through the H, the O, the M, and the E blocks. But if you need to see it slowed down and at a slower speed so you can sew along with me, those are the steps on how to do it, okay? Now, this is going to be so much fun. I think there's a lot of different things that you could do with this pattern too. You don't just have to make a table runner. You could make it a square quilt, and I'm going to show you an example of that. And I think that if you wanted to do like a row by row quilt, you could adapt this pattern for something like that. And wouldn't that be so cute? I always think that there's always more than one way to use a pattern, don't you? And I love how creative you are and different ways that you use your patterns to make something all on your own, right? I think you could do that with this pattern. I'm tongue-tied today. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring you right down to the cutting mat. I'm going to walk you through prepping the paper foundations, cutting out the templates, and then we're going to get busy with some paper piecing. Are you ready? Let's go. This pattern comes with written instructions and all of your yardage and piece requirements and the sizes of your pieces and basic instructions. For the paper piecing portion, I'm leaving it up to the video to walk you through those instructions. Now these are your paper foundations. For each one of your lettered blocks, you're going to go through and cut them out on the outside line. Your H and your O blocks need a little bit of assembly before we start paper piecing. The H block is going to instruct you to glue it together on the dotted line, just like you see me doing right here, and I'm just using a glue stick. You'll see right on the foundation a little note with an arrow where to glue your pieces. The H block can be pieced all as one block. It just was too big to print on a basic standard letter size piece of paper. So there's our H block. The O block is exactly the same way. You will cut it and paste it together right on that dotted line indicated right on your foundation. These are the only 2 blocks that you have to do any prep work to. The M and the E blocks, we're actually piecing as 2 separate units and then sewing them together, and you'll see that as we move along in the tutorial. This only really just takes a minute to do, and it goes by pretty quick if you have a rotary cutter for paper. So here we are. We have 2 complete H and O blocks. The M block will be paper pieced in 2 sections, just like this. And the E block will also be paper pieced in 2 sections, just like this. Now, if you want to use the templates to pre-cut your fabrics, which I find super easy and really helpful, then you'll use this portion of the pattern, right? And there's a little guide to show you all of the different templates for each one of the 4 blocks. Each one of the different templates is lettered, and on the templates are different colored letters to try to organize all of these templates. It's a lot of templates. So you see the different colored letters for the blocks, and then the different positions for the template. And you'll just simply go through, if you want to use these, and cut them out on the outside line, just like you see me doing right here. So to get started, we're going to start with the H block. This block is going to be all done in one piece, and I have my H templates. They have the little orange letter H on each one of them, A, B, and C. So we're going to start here right in the very first position. That's using the C template. And for this project, I'm going to use some leftover Jolly Bar scraps fabrics that I have from another project. And I grabbed some brown fabric that I'm going to use as my background. So on each one of these blocks, you'll see the actual letter part is tinted like a bluish gray color, and the background is left white. I'm going to go through and cut each one of these pieces as we're going along. I'm not going to take the time to pre-cut them before starting, and I think sometimes this just speeds up the process a little bit. That very first fabric we're going to glue with the right side facing up. And we're actually placing these fabrics on the back side of our paper foundation. When cutting out your fabrics using the templates, you'll actually have the fabric with the right side facing up. So the second fabric and all the other fabrics, when we place it, we're placing right side facing down. We'll bring it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew directly right on that line between the first and second position. Now I have lowered my stitch length to a 1.2. You might have to adjust your stitch length a little bit depending on your machine and the thread you're using. And then we're going to trim away the extra fabric, leaving just a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We'll add some glue into that second position. And then I just like to finger press that fabric right into the glue and just use my fingernail or a seam roller to press that seam. Then we're going to move to the third position, and that's using the B template. I'm going to cut out my piece of fabric. Right side facing down. We're going to be sewing on that line between the first and the third position. So we're just going to move quickly as I add each one of these pieces. Today I'm using my add a 1/4 seam ruler and that just helps me get a nice accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance and trim off that extra fabric. So as we're going along, you're going to notice that I have fabric that extends beyond the paper edge, and that's what you want to see, because when we're done piecing all of the fabrics for this block, we will square it up in the end. I'm not sure if I said this or not, but when I'm using the templates, I like to make sure that the fabric has the right side facing up. If you plan on making a whole lot of these, what you could do is make clear templates, and then you could kind of fussy cut your fabrics if you wanted to. We just sewed that long seam, and now we can trim away that extra fabric, add some glue, and flip that fabric over. Altogether, to piece these 4 blocks. It took me about an hour and a half, and that was just really taking my time and sort of enjoying the process and filming, which kind of slows down the process too. So if you are an experienced paper piecer, I don't know that piecing these 4 blocks would even take you an hour. If you are just learning, then sometimes I find it to be a little bit tricky, right? Learning the process back and forth. And but once you get the hang of it, I think the whole project speeds up pretty quickly. So here we are adding the last fabric for the H block. And where the magic really happens is when you trim up the extra fabric. So I'm going to line up the inside line with the 1/4 inch line on my ruler and just trim away all the extra fabric that extends beyond that paper foundation. And here we go, the big reveal of our finished H block. Isn't that so pretty? Usually I work with a light background. This time I decided to use a brown fabric, and I kind of really like that a lot. So there's my H block. Now we can move on, and we're going to do the O block together. The O block is another block that is all in one. So we've already glued it together. I'll go through and grab my O templates, which have the red O on each one of them. We're starting here in the first position with the fabric right side facing up. For 2 and 3, we're using the same templates, so I just stacked my fabrics and cut them both out at the same time. That speeds up the process a little bit. And I'm going to bring both of these fabrics over and sew them both while I'm right here at the sewing machine. Anytime I can sew more than one seam at a time, I think that speeds up the process a little bit. Then we'll come back over here, take off the extra fabric, add our glue, and flip our fabrics right on over. Now we're going to be working on position number 4 with the B template. Paper piecing projects are great if you have scraps of fabric that you're not quite sure what to do with, but you're not ready to actually get rid of them. You want to use them. Paper piecing is a great way to use them up. And applique. But today we're doing paper piecing. For the O block, there's actually 4 of the little A pieces of fabric that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut all of those out all at one time and set the other ones to the side until we get ready to use them. I'll bring this over to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew both of those seams at the same time. Today I'm just using regular copy paper, printing paper to print my foundations and to sew with. And using that short seam allowance really helps just sew right through that paper, and the paper comes off pretty easy at the end, and you'll see. So now we're going to flip it over, and we're on position number 7 using the B template. And from here on out, I don't think we're going to continue going back and forth to the sewing machine. I think you get that part. And just to save a little bit of time in today's video, I'll sew that off camera, and we'll just cut and come right back after the seam is sewn. Sometimes I find it helpful just to remove a little bit of the length before placing my pieces like you just saw me do. We'll go add those 2 pieces. come back, add our glue, press our seams, and that's all the pieces for the O block. We can go ahead and trim up the extra fabric all the way around. And here she is, all nice and pretty, my O block. I really kind of like the darker background, especially with these particular fabrics. I really like that. Now just keep in mind we're going to have a sashing piece in between these blocks to help kind of separate them, right? Next up we have the M block. So the M block we're actually piecing in two different sections. Using my template and my scraps, I'm just going to go through and cut out my pieces, add my first piece, and then cut out the second and third positions, right? I really like paper piecing for the fact that the sewing lines are provided for you, right? And there's no tricky 1/4 inch seam allowances for the most part when doing paper piecing, right? You're just sewing on the line. Now when we're joining our pieces at the end, we do have to pay attention to our 1/4 inch seam allowance, right? But if you just want some nice and easy sewing, maybe you have an ebook or a movie on in the background, you just want to do some sewing, but you don't want to have to worry so much about accuracy, that's when paper piecing is really fun. So I'm cutting out the fabric, the fourth fabric for this piece. Then trimming up the extra fabric. There's not a whole lot this time. Gluing and flipping that fabric right on over. So we can go ahead and trim away the extra fabric here on this foundation. So here's the first half of the letter M. Now we're going to go ahead and piece the 4 fabrics for the second half of the letter M. I don't know if you can hear the birds in the background. I have the windows open and it's just such a relaxing sound. I'm just eyeballing, leaving a 1/4 inch, you'll see that. And then I just go through and cut my next 2 fabrics. I'm hoping that showing my workflow is helpful. I mean, I know we all do things differently, and you might actually do it the exact same way that I do. You might do it totally different. I just always find it fascinating watching other people's YouTube videos, the method in which they use, and I'm always picking up tips and helpful little ideas that sometimes I'm just like, wow, that makes so much sense, let me try it that way, and then it clicks, you know? And so I'm hoping just bringing you through my workflow, even though it has sped up so much, I'm hoping that it simplifies the process for you, and maybe I do something in a way that makes it all click and make sense. Maybe not. You might watch this and be totally confused. And that's okay. There's lots of great teachers here on YouTube, and I'm just hoping that you actually just enjoy this project. So here are the 2 halves of the M block, and all that's left to do is to flip one side over. We're going to match up that raw edge right there, and I'm still leaving the paper on. We're going to bring this over to the sewing machine, And I'm not going to set a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use the line right on the paper foundation, still using my 1.2 stitch length, and I'm going to sew right directly on that line. Bringing it over, I like to use my little pointy tool from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to remove the paper from that seam allowance right there. Still going to keep the other paper on for just a little bit. Leaving that paper on does stabilize all of those diagonal seams, right? We're going to open up that seam and give it a press, nice and flat. So here's our finished end block. Isn't that perfect? I love that. I also like the fact that I've used just different fabrics for a scrappy look on this table runner. So there's the H, the O, and the end blocks. All that's left is the letter E. We're going to bring over the E templates and the E foundation. I'm going to cut out the first 3 fabrics and then get busy sewing these on, placing the first one down, right side facing up. Then we're going to go through and add the second fabric. And then the third. The fourth and the fifth. Now you'll see here, I cut the wrong fabrics. These were supposed to be actually E fabrics, not background fabrics. So if I was paying attention, I would have noticed that. But again, the actual E or the letter is shaded on the foundation and the background is white. So now I just quickly cut out 2 more pieces and we're ready to add those and also those at the same time and come back and flip them over. We have 1 more fabric to add for this section. We're going to flip that fabric over and then trim away all of the extra fabric all the way around the foundation. This is one of my favorite parts because I always think before trimming that extra fabric it looks a little haywire, right? And then once you trim it, it just really just transforms the whole piece. So for the second part of the E, there's only 3 pieces of fabric we need, right? So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of those out. And 2 seams make up this section. We can trim away that extra fabric. And now we have these 2 sections for the letter E. We're going to flip over the smaller one. We're going to line up those raw edges right there. And I'm still leaving the paper on. I'm going to use that solid line as my sewing line again. I'm going to remove the paper from the seam allowance. We're going to open up that seam and then give that a press nice and flat. And here is my finished E block. I didn't notice I have two fabrics the same. At least they're going in different directions at the bottom of the E. So once you have your 4 blocks like this, you can go ahead and remove the paper, right? Before adding all the other pieces for your table runner. So I'm just using my vinyl weeding tool. I got this one at the Dollar Tree, y'all. That's all it really is. It's like a little needle with a plastic handle. I like to pre-score the sewing lines. To me, I think it just helps remove that paper a little bit easier. But you'll see, even using that short seam stitch length really helps just cut the paper, and it all comes off pretty easy. Once you have the paper removed from the 4 blocks, we're ready to add the sashing and the 2 inner borders on the left and the right. So I just start a little assembly line right here and I add my sashing and my left and right inner border pieces. Sorry, I have to move the camera, back you up a little bit. And we're adding those with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The measurements for the sashing and the borders are on the first page of the pattern. Sorry, I had to do some adjustments. And I just flip over the piece and add the next block, and I'm going to just press all of these seams once I've added each one of these strips between the blocks. Sometimes for me that just speeds things up, not going back and forth, back and forth. It's been a lot of fun making this table runner, although it feels like it's taking me forever. Every time I go to sit down to work on it, something comes up and then I have to put it off to the next day, and then something comes up and I have to put it off to the next day. Do you ever just have periods of time where it just seems like the things you really want to work on have to be put off until later? So here I am, I've worked my way from one side to the other. I'm going to go give those seams a press, and then when we come back, I'm going to add the inner border on the top and the bottom of this strip of blocks. I didn't realize that I didn't cut this part of the video out. So I'm over there pressing. All right. We're coming back. That's the beauty of being able to speed up the video. Now I'm just going to add that long strip. This is the inner border. It goes right over top of the home blocks. I feel like once I got to this point, I really started making a lot of progress on these projects. I had the blocks done for quite a few days before I could have the time to actually assemble everything together. Once you get to this point, you're on the home stretch, right? All right, I went and pressed those 2 inner borders. And now we're going to add the outside borders. So
real simple. Just an inner border and an outside border. Can you hear my kitty cat? I'll go press those seams. So I added the left and the right first. I'm pressing those seams, and now I'll add the top and the bottom. I have fallen in love with the color brown. It seems like I'm using brown in not all my projects, but about 80% of my projects now. I'm using the color brown, which is surprising to me because it's always been a color that I didn't have very much of. But the last several times I've purchased fabric, there's been some browns in there. So now I'm just adding the last border that goes on, the last border piece. And even though this project has some good size on it, it's really not that unmanageable. Now I'll go give those borders a press. And here we are after my borders have been added and everything's pressed. Now what's really fun is I did a square version, and I'm going to put the measurements of the sashing and border because the square version is not in the pattern. This is just something I thought of as I was making the video. Maybe that's why it took me so long, is because I actually did a second project from this pattern that wasn't actually part of the pattern. So now I'm going to go ahead and just base my layers, and we'll start with this square project first. I have the back fabric down first, right side facing down. I'm going to use some thin, warm and natural batting on this particular project, and I'm going to glue baste everything together. And it's undecided. I'll either dry this glue with a hot iron, or I'm going to let it sit and dry because I still have other things to do that's calling my name. But either way, the glue will be dry when I bring it over to the sewing machine to do my quilting. So that was the square project. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the long table runner. Which version do you like better? Do you like the long table runner or do you like the square version? I think they're both a lot of fun. I'm kind of partial to the long table runner, but I really do like the layout of the square version too. So what do you think? Also, do you like the darker brown background or do you like the lighter background of the square project? I'm just curious. I don't usually use a dark background, so that was new for me. This time I've switched over to a wet Elmer's glue. Sometimes that just seems to work a little bit easier for me, but it does take longer for it to dry before I can bring this to the sewing machine. Now, off camera, I'm going to quilt these because I feel like this video is already getting kind of long. And the quilting I kept very, very simple. And I'm going to show you some real good close-ups of these two projects as they're finished and what I did for the quilting. But there are endless possibilities for quilting on these projects, right? You could do all kinds of stuff. I was halfway tempted to load them on the long arm and do some kind of edge-to-edge pantograph design on it, but instead I used my sit-down, I used my Juki, and I did some really cute quilting. You'll see it here in just a minute. But I feel like there's all kinds of different things you could do with the quilting, and we'll see that here in just a second. So now we're going to let this dry. And here I am all finished quilting. Now this long table runner, I kept it so super simple. I did a stitch in the ditch. Okay, I did a stitch in a ditch around the borders and the sashing and then around the letters, right? So just kind of makes the word pop on the background a little bit. I feel like it would pop even more if I had done a second layer of batting, but I really like how it looks, and it's anchored those blocks good in place. So there's my long table runner. I love that one. Kind of like the dark background. What do you think? And in the square version, I switched it up and I did a couple of decorative stitches in my sewing machine. One of them is a blanket stitch. So it kind of looks like the letters are appliqued onto my quilt, doesn't it? Just a little bit. And then I picked a decorative stitch to do in the border and the sashing, and it kind of gives it this little puckered look, which I thought was super adorable, right? So there's just a couple of quilting ideas for you, but like I said, there's all different kinds of things that you can do with these table runners, and I hope you have so much fun with them. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, walking through these projects, and I hope to see you really soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.